Hi there, welcome to this build of a 49-inch wingspan Diamond Demon, and this is a lovely vintage model from the late 1930s, and to build this we're using a great set of plans from Ben Buckle in the UK. Now up till now we're fairly advanced with this build. We've got the fuselage more or less finished, there's still stuff to do. We've got the tailplane, the rudder and fin hanging up there, and in the last video we got both of the wings finished, and these are a lovely under-cambered wing, really nice with a lovely shaped wing tip. So we've got these two identical wings built with a spruce spar, and they're quite light, and what we're going to do in this video is we're going to join them together and we're going to build the central section kind of at the same time as well. And that's, for me, joining wings together, I always feel slightly nervous because if you get it wrong and there's a twist, it's going to be difficult to correct. But it's a really exciting time as well, because that's when your model really starts to take shape, when you can hold those wings together and put them on the fuselage and see how it looks. So what I'm going to do, I've done a little bit of preparation here. I've got some what do you call them, dihedral braces. Dihedral braces. I've got a little bit for the central section and the ribs, but I'll move the camera around and I'll show you what I've got and how I'm going to join this together. Actually, one very quick point before we have a look at what we're going to do, and that is I've profiled the wingtips, and I think it's a really good thing to do while you can still put them side by side, particularly on these because there was quite a lot of balsa to come off. They were quite chunky, so it was really useful being able to have them side by side and actually look at the tips and compare them and see what balsa needed to come off where. I haven't touched the leading edge. I've left that nice sharp edge of the 3/16 balsa there, and also I've left the trailing edge untapered. And the reason I've done that is because these are really good reference points. So when I'm measuring the dihedral, I've got those nice sharp edges which are consistent on both wings to measure against. If I start profiling these, then I could kind of change it, only small amounts, but I would rather do that, set it out with these nice crisp edges that I haven't touched, and then afterwards, once we've got it joined, we can then profile these. Might not be quite as easy, but it'll be fine. So anyway, let's have a look at what we've done so far. Right, well, first off, I've got my ribs, which I made in the previous video. I've got 4 of them. I only need 3, but I always end up making one more just in case I have an accident with one of them, break it or cut the slot too big. I've also cut some dihedral braces. Now these are from the plans using the template, and they've ended up a little bit too long for what I want. I want to have them so they just fill this section here between just this one rib spacing. So I could trim those down, which is no problem, but these are made out of 1/16 ply or 1.6 mil ply. So I'm getting a total of 1/8, if you like, of plywood, and that is holding together the spruce, which is 1/4 of an inch. And it just seems a massive weak point to have only 1/8 dihedral brace and you know, a 1/4 inch spar. What's the point of having the 1/4 inch spar? So what I've done is I've upgraded them. These are, I think they're more or less 2.5 mil, just over 3/32. So essentially we've got over 5 mil of plywood there in the dihedral brace, which is going to glue onto the 1/4 inch 6 mil spar. This is 6 mil by what, 12.5, something like that. It's a 1/2 inch by 1/4. So basically I've upgraded the thickness of the dihedral braces, and this adds very little weight. I've had them on the scales and it makes like 2 grams difference or something. There's nothing to it. I've got the central section which is from the same spruce as the spars in the wings, and this needs to be the width of the fuselage, so you need to measure that against the fuselage that you've built. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this terminal rib, because this is the very last rib with the fuselage in edge of the fuselage in line with this rib. I'm going to have that the same spacing as all the other ribs. Just for consistency, it'll look so much better. So I've marked the location of that rib, just using a big set square going across and marking on the width of the rib. Now I've angled these. I've just measured the dihedral and put an angled line on there to which I'm going to cut, so that when we get the spruce on from the central section, that will give us more or less the right dihedral. We'll probably have to just sand it a little bit and just adjust it a bit, but hopefully that won't be too far out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue these dihedral braces either side of this central section to make the central section like that we can then put on the table and set the wings up in between like that, and hopefully we won't be far out when we come to set it up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim these ends. I'm going to mark up the other wing and trim that, and I'm going to get this glued, and then I'll set it up and we'll have a look at that. Just thought I'd very quickly show you how I've got this glued up and clamped up. I've got the spruce in between, I've epoxied it, and it's just held with a couple of clamps, and I've put a bit of spruce of the same thickness under each end, so I can just make sure that it's kind of level, square, whatever, so that it's equal on both sides, let's say. Once that's set or cured, I will sand it up, clean it up, and get the wings together, and we'll have another look. You can see I've cut the angle on these now, on the spars and also on these back edges. Haven't touched these, don't need to at this stage. I'll do that once it's all glued together. Right, well, look at that. That is really exciting. The epoxy cured on that central section. I sanded the bottom just lightly to make sure there was no high spots or bits of glue sticking down. I put it on the bench. I've put the weight on top just to hold it firm, and I've lifted the tips to the correct dihedral, which is 3 7/8 of an inch under each wing tip. And as I said, I've got the clamps on it, and that is just holding it in place. And I've eyed it up from where the camera's filming, and it looks, to me, it looks perfect. I can't see any twists or anything that concerns me. What I do is I get to the position where the camera is, and I go down and I just follow the leading edge and go down until I can just see the trailing edge appearing in my sight, and I just kind of go up and down and just make sure that they look absolutely equal either side. I mean, yes, I can measure as well, measure the trailing edge, which I'll do when I finally set it up and glue it, and the leading edge, but I find measuring it is good for getting the height equal on either side, but as far as it's twisted, I find my vision is much better at just eyeing that up and making sure that there's no twists. But I am really pleased with that. I'll bring the camera in and I'll just take this apart and show you how it's set up quickly, and then I'm going to think about probably gluing this next before I build up the front and back and the ribs, but we'll have a quick look now. Right, well, just before I take this apart, it's going to be easy enough once this central section's glued to glue a piece in the back here and the front, and also just to widen out the slot in the ribs so that the ribs just slot in there, and there is a central rib as well, and then some cross bracing, but we'll have a look at that in a bit. So let me take this apart. I could probably lift this weight off without it going anywhere, and then if we take off the clamp, actually I'll hold it, I need 3 hands here so I don't smack them down on the table. There we go. and we can see that's just a central piece that's been epoxied. And let's face it, if that is square to the table, the wings were built with this spruce bar nice and square to the table, then everything should be in line as it is. So really relieved to see how that clamps up. When we clamp wings up, to get them in the right position, they need to have a certain amount of, they need to be relaxed. We can't be forcing them into position and gluing them and expecting them to stay there. They need to go in nice and easy, like I say, without any tension to kind of force them into that position. Okay, well, I'm going to get this glued up now, I think, so I'm going to get it set out and glued, and then we'll have a look at just building up this central bit, which is nice and simple. Well, I've got this epoxied and all set up now, and I'm really excited to get this done. I've checked the wingtip measurements numerous times, just keep going backwards and forwards, making sure it's just right. And I've got the central section weighted down, I've got the clamps, 2 clamps on either side, that's all it is room for. If there was more room, I'd put more clamps. The very tip of the trailing edge on both sides is just touching the work surface, which is nice. There's no supports under the wing at all, so it's where it is because it's clamped, and it's going to glue solid where it's clamped. So all I can do now is just wait for this to cure, and it's dead exciting. I probably will just check it once more though, because I'd hate for it to go wrong, but it looks great and there's no twist or anything. So, well, the epoxy is now cured and I've got it unclamped, and it looks great. It looks really nice and straight and true. I'm so pleased to get this done, and I've just cleaned up the underside, hopefully you can see there, so that's just nice and smooth. On the one side, the dihedral braces were just sticking down just a little bit below the spar, so I've just cleaned that up, but that is lovely. I am really pleased. So now I'm going to start to build up this central section. Right, it's time to get this central section built up, and I'm going to put a piece of trailing edge in first, which I've already put a notch in for that central rib. Central rib. Now, you need to be really careful not to make this too big, because we can force these trailing edges apart, which kind of bends the wing round a little bit if we're not careful. So it just needs to be a really nice, precise fit. And I've got the 3 ribs, and I've done the central one already, and we've got the right hand one which goes in, and I've cut this leading edge so it just slides onto the side of it. The last thing I'm going to do is the leading edge. I'm going to get this trailing edge, get the ribs in. I've still got this rib to cut. We'll get that rib in, and then we can put a piece of leading edge nice and straight across the front where the bird mouths are. So I'm going to get on and do that, and then we're more or less done. The only thing I have got to do after that is there's some 1/8 by 3/16 pieces that go across at intervals across this central section, just to strengthen it where the elastic bands are going to go. But we'll deal with that in a little while. So I'll get on and do this now. Right, well, as you can see, almost got this finished now, got it built up. I've got these 3 ribs in, and I've also put some gussets in these corners just to it just gives it a little bit more strength. It's surprising the difference it makes with very little extra weight. I've got the leading edge in, and when I put that, before I put the leading edge in, I just sanded it a little bit flat on the back here on the edge, so that these gussets would get a better contact point. Now, the only thing really that's left to do to this now is to put in some pieces of cross bracing across these 3 ribs, and these are 1/8 by 3/16. Now on the plan it shows 4 of these, which are basically 1, 2, 3, 4. But I can't see why. I mean, these are to give strength as the elastic bands come across, but I can't see why we didn't have one there. So, because I would have thought there's quite a lot of pressure just there from the elastic bands. So I'm going to put in 5 rather than 4. And I've spaced these 25mm apart. And I'm just going to cut those with a razor saw. I think I'll probably cut all 3 together. And to make sure I get them nice and parallel, I'll probably do 1, and then I'll fix a 1, and then I'll do that, and I'll do them in consecutive order rather than trying to do all the cuts first and then put them in. So I'm going to get that done, and then the only thing that we need to do, I've cut these slightly oversized and I'll just sand them to fit. The only thing we've got to do after that is just profile this this trailing edge, and I think I'll just put that on the bench and plane that, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. Right, well, we're almost there. You can see I've got this central section done now, and it feels really quite strong there, as if that will hold the elastic bands really nicely. So the only thing that's left to do now is to profile these trailing edges. I've still got the bull nose to put on, but I'll put that on when I do the overall finishing sand, because there's very little to do there. It's just to take that edge off. But this is quite a broad trailing edge. I think this was 1/4 inch, was it? Yeah, it was. So what I want to do is I want to plane this down, not quite to a point as shown on the plans here, but to a lot thinner anyway. If it comes right down to a point, it's going to be a little bit too weak. But I want to follow the line of the ribs down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that right on the very edge of my table. I've got my balsa plane, and I'm just going to very carefully run that down. Now I need to be really careful here that I don't catch anything, and I do this nice and gently. Now when we get to here, we are going to run out because the plane is going to hit that as it rises up, so we'll end up having to do that bit by sanding it, but we can certainly do the bulk of it like this. And you can see that's coming off, oops, really nicely. You see I'm getting some quite nice broad pieces of balsa off this now, and I can hear the plane just lightly catching the top of the ribs, not the blade, just this bit here, and that tells me I'm at more or less the right angle for this. And to get this right, it really is a case of just taking it nice and steady and checking that edge that we haven't taken too much off. And of course there will be some sanding to get it finished right. There we go. Well, I've now got the wings finished, and it feels great to have built these, and they're lovely and straight and true. And they're not that heavy. I've just put them on a set of scales and they come in at 97 grams. So I think these are going to be great. And I've profiled that trailing edge. It's still about 30 seconds along the back here. So I haven't brought it down to a point. I don't know whether that actually shows, but I'm pleased with how it looks, and I think having it just a little bit thicker than a point will give it a little bit more strength. There's still a finishing sand, still a little bit, maybe the odd bit on the tips, I'm not sure. But essentially, oh, and the ball nose. But essentially they're done, and it feels great to get them done. And of course we have to try it on the fuselage and see how it looks. There we go. Now that's really good to see that. We can really see this model starting to take shape now. And you know, we now have the majority of the construction of this model finished, the kind of the gross construction, if you like. We've done the tailplane and fin as well, which we can just rest on. I think in the next video I'm going to be looking at, just turn that round so you can see it. There we go. I think in the next video we're going to be looking at fitting the tailplane and fin rudder assembly and the wings, and making sure that they fit all square and true in relation to each other as much as anything. And we need to make sure we've got the dowels for the elastic bands. So I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and I hope you'll join me in the next video where we, like I say, get these wings and tailplane fitted. It's been such an exciting process for me to get these wings finished and to see how this model looks and see it taking shape. So anyway, I hope you found it interesting and even exciting, and please come back and see how we get on in the next stage of this 49-inch wingspan Diamond Demon.